The briefing room fell silent when I stood up. Not the comfortable kind of silence, the razor-edge kind, where every breath sounds like a scream. Sherry-Ann, sit down. My father's voice cut through the tension like a blade. You don't belong here. 50 pairs of eyes turned toward me. Some confused. Some curious. Most dismissive. But Admiral Thorne's eyes, those granite-gray eyes that had stared down enemy combatants and international crises, narrowed with interest. Call sign, he demanded. 2 words. That's all it took to detonate my father's entire understanding of who I was. Shadow 9. The blood drained from Commander Elias Crane's face like someone had pulled a plug. His mouth opened, closed, opened again, a fish drowning in air. I watched my father, the man who'd commanded destroyers through hostile waters, the man who never flinched, physically recoil in his chair. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because to understand that moment, that beautiful, terrible moment of revelation, you need to know how a girl dismissed as detail-oriented became one of the Navy's most lethal ghosts. This is my story. And if you've ever been underestimated by the people who should know you best, you're going to want to hear every word. Growing up in the Crane household wasn't living, it was surviving an endless inspection. Virginia Beach, 2003. Our house at 847 Lighthouse Avenue looked like every other Navy family home on the block. Perfect lawn, American flag snapping in the salt breeze, foundation painted in regulation colors. But inside, Commander Elias Crane ran our home like a ship. And not just any ship, his ship. Every morning at 6 o'clock hours, shoes had to be lined up by the door with military precision. Beds made with hospital corners tight enough to bounce a quarter. The American flag folded into a perfect triangle every evening before dinner. And dinner? Exactly 1800 hours. Not 5:59. Not 6:01. 6 o'clock. Order isn't optional, Sherry-Ann, Dad would say, his voice carrying that deep, resonant quality that made junior officers snap to attention. It's what keeps the world from falling apart. I was 12 the first time I understood I was invisible. It was Marcus's 14th birthday, a backyard barbecue filled with neighbors, fellow officers, and their perfect Navy families. My older brother held court by the grill, recounting how he'd led his football team to victory with a last-second touchdown. Dad stood beside him, hand on his shoulder, chest puffed with pride. This kid, Dad announced to anyone within earshot, is a born leader. Natural commander. I'm telling you, Marcus is going places in this world. I sat at the picnic table, sketching tactical maps in my notebook, trying to solve a hypothetical hostage rescue scenario I'd read about in one of Dad's old journals. I'd worked out 3 possible extraction routes, factored in civilian casualties, even calculated optimal timing based on guard shift changes. Sherry-Ann. Mom called. Come help me bring out the cake. Not, come join us. Not, tell everyone about your straight A report card. Just, cake duty. Later that night, after the guests left, I found Dad in his study. The walls were covered with commendations, photographs of him with admirals and senators, shadow boxes displaying medals I didn't yet understand. I clutched my notebook, pulse hammering. Dad? Can I show you something? He looked up from his paperwork, reading glasses perched on his nose. What is it, kiddo? I've got a briefing to prep for. I opened my notebook, showing him my extraction scenarios. I've been studying your old mission reports, the unclassified ones, and I worked out 3 different ways to. Sherry-Ann. His voice was gentle but firm. The tone that meant the conversation was over before it began. This is nice. But why don't you focus on things that suit you better? You've got such a good head for details. Maybe you'll be a teacher someday. Or a librarian. Something stable. Something stable. Something safe. Something small. But what if I wanted to do what you do? The words tumbled out before I could stop them. Dad chuckled, not meanly, but with the kind of amused tolerance adults use with children who've said something adorable and naive. He ruffled my hair. Some girls can, kiddo. But it takes a certain type. Special operations isn't about being smart, it's about being fearless. Stick to what you're good at. I nodded, backing out of his study. But his words didn't crush me. They crystallized something inside me, turned it hard and diamond sharp. I'll show you fearless, I thought. I'll show you, and you'll never even see me coming. High school was a blur of contradictions. By day, I was Sherry Crane, quiet, reliable, the girl who tutored struggling students and won academic awards nobody attended. By night, I devoured everything I could find about military strategy, cryptography, hand-to-hand combat. I joined the track team. Not because I loved running, but because I needed to be faster, stronger, harder to catch. While Marcus quarterbacked the football team to regional championships, with Dad at every game, screaming himself hoarse, I ran in silence, pushing my body past limits I didn't know existed. Senior year, I approached Marcus in his room the night before graduation. He was surrounded by recruitment letters from colleges, offers for football scholarships scattered across his bed like confetti. "You're really joining the Navy?" he asked, barely looking up. Day after graduation, I confirmed. Dad must be thrilled. Following the family tradition. He nodded when I told him. Said, "Good benefits." Marcus finally met my eyes. Something like sympathy flickered there. "Hey, Shar. You know you don't have to prove anything, right? You could go to college, study engineering or something. You don't have to chase Dad's approval." "I'm not chasing anything," I said quietly. "I'm becoming something." He didn't understand. How could he? Marcus had been handed approval since birth. He'd never had to claw for it, bleed for it, disappear for it. The night before I left for boot camp, Dad pulled me aside after dinner. We stood on the back porch, listening to waves crash in the distance. "I'm proud of you," he said. "The Navy will teach you discipline. Give you structure." I waited for more. Asked what I hoped to accomplish. What drove me to serve. Whether he saw any of himself in my choice. But that was it. Just structure. "Thanks, Dad," I whispered. He patted my shoulder and walked back inside. And I stood there, fists clenched, making a promise to myself, I will be so good at this that one day, you'll have no choice but to see me. Boot camp broke most recruits. It forged me. While others struggled with the relentless physical demands, I excelled. While they complained about sleep deprivation and hostile instructors, I absorbed everything like a sponge. Navigation. Weapons training. Tactical assessment. Hand-to-hand combat. But it was the psychological evaluations that changed everything. Week 7. A nondescript office. A psychologist with kind eyes and a clipboard. "You score exceptionally high in spatial reasoning, stress management, and adaptability," she said. "But you also show unusual markers in compartmentalization and emotional regulation. Have you ever considered special operations?" My heart stopped. Yes. Always. There's a program. I can't tell you much about it. But people like you, people who can become invisible when necessary, who can hold secrets that would break others, you're exactly who we need. 3 weeks later, I was pulled from my regular unit. No explanation. Just orders to report to a facility that didn't exist on any official map. The selection process was brutal. 70 candidates. Physical tests that left me bleeding and bruised. Psychological evaluations designed to shatter your sense of self. Cryptography challenges that made my brain scream. Simulation after simulation of impossible scenarios. 40 candidates washed out in the first month. 20 more in the second. On day 87, I stood in a room with 9 other survivors. A commander, face scarred, eyes cold, walked the line. "You are ghosts now," he said. "The work you do will save lives. It will prevent wars. It will change the course of history. And no one will ever know your name. He stopped in front of me. You need a call sign. Something that reflects who you are in the dark. I didn't hesitate. Shadow 9. His eyebrow raised. Explain. Shadow, because I'll be the one they never see coming. 9, because I'll have 9 different versions of myself, whatever the mission requires. I'll be everyone and no one. The faintest smile touched his scarred face. Shadow 9 it is. For 6 years, I lived in fragments. Deployments to countries I couldn't name. Missions I couldn't discuss. Identities I wore like masks and discarded like tissues. I extracted high-value targets from enemy compounds. Decoded communications that prevented terrorist attacks. Infiltrated organizations so deep I sometimes forgot where the role ended and I began. And through it all, I sent postcards home. Doing well in my assignment. Weather's nice. Miss you. Sherry-N. Dad's responses were equally sparse. Proud of you, kiddo. Keep your head down. Stay safe. Dad. Every holiday I missed, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Marcus's wedding, came with identical messages. Surface-level check-ins from a father who assumed I was filing paperwork on some quiet base somewhere. The one time I came home on leave, Marcus cornered me at a family barbecue. Same backyard. Same grill. Different everything else. So what exactly do you do, sis? He asked, beer in hand, genuine curiosity in his eyes. You've been in 6 years and I still don't know your job title. I sipped my drink, watching Dad across the yard, deep in conversation with a retired admiral. I work in intelligence support. That's it? Intelligence support? That's it. Sounds boring as hell. He laughed, clapping my shoulder. But hey, somebody's gotta push the papers, right? I smiled. Said nothing. Because what could I say that wouldn't destroy the classification levels protecting operations across 3 continents? Dad approached, spatula in hand. You two behaving? Always, I said. You staying busy, Sherry-N? They treating you right? Always busy. Always treated right. He nodded, satisfied, and returned to his grill. The conversation was over. As far as he knew, I was exactly what he'd always expected, competent, reliable, and utterly unremarkable. If only he knew that 3 weeks earlier, I'd been in a firefight in a country he'd never heard of, extracting an asset while enemy combatants fired on our position. If only he knew that the paperwork I pushed included decoded messages that stopped a bombing in a major European city. But he didn't know. Couldn't know. And part of me, the part that still ached for his approval, died a little every time he looked through me instead of at me. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Plain. White. Official Navy seal. I opened it standing in my apartment kitchen, still wearing my running gear, sweat cooling on my skin. Classified briefing and recognition ceremony. Admiral Thorne presiding. Lieutenant Marcus Crane honored for exemplary service in logistics coordination. And then, at the bottom, family attendance, Sherry-N Crane. No rank. No title. Not even Ms. or petty officer. Just family attendance. Like I was Marcus's +1 to his own celebration. I stood there for 5 minutes, the invitation trembling in my hand. Every instinct screamed to RSVP no. To skip it entirely. To avoid another room where I'd be invisible while my brother, who'd never seen combat, never held a secret that could topple governments, was celebrated. But something else whispered beneath the anger. What if this is your moment? What if this is when everything changes? I checked the RSVP box marked yes and mailed it before I could change my mind. The morning of the briefing arrived with crystalline clarity. Sky so blue it hurt. Air so crisp it felt like breathing possibility. I dressed in civilian clothes, dark jeans, simple navy blouse, leather jacket. Nothing that would draw attention. My clearance badge stayed hidden in my pocket, a talisman I'd need later. The drive to the base was automatic. Gate guards waved me through with barely a glance. Just another family member arriving for another ceremony. But as I walked toward the briefing facility, a nondescript building behind 3 layers of security, guards straightened. A few nodded. One whispered something to his partner, eyes widening. They knew Shadow 9. Even if they didn't know my face, they knew the call sign. The briefing room was exactly what I expected: reinforced doors, soundproofing, dim lighting designed to focus attention on the screens at the front. A long conference table dominated the space, flanked by officers in dress uniforms. Dad sat near the front, his retired status granting him observer privileges. He looked older than I remembered, grayer, lines deeper around his eyes. Marcus sat beside him, fidgeting with his phone, whispering jokes to a fellow lieutenant. I slipped into a chair at the far end of the table. Anonymous. Forgettable. Dad's eyes found me. A brief smile. Good to see you, kiddo. Didn't think you'd make it. Wouldn't miss it, I said quietly. Marcus waved. Hey, Shar. Thanks for coming. This thing is probably going to be boring as hell, but free lunch after, right? I nodded, arranging my face into something resembling sisterly affection. Then Admiral Thorne entered. The room snapped to attention, even retired personnel like Dad stood straighter. Thorne was a legend, 3 decades of service, 2 wars, countless classified operations that shaped global policy. He moved with the economy of someone who'd learned that wasted motion could mean death. At ease, he said, his voice carrying effortlessly. This is a Level 4 classified briefing. We're discussing an upcoming operation that requires top-tier clearance and specialized skill sets. Maps flickered to life on the screens. Redacted locations. Timelines marked in red. Asset positions blacked out. Even from my position at the end of the table, I could read the situation: high-risk extraction, hostile territory, narrow operational window. My pulse quickened. Not from fear. From recognition. This was my world. The operation requires personnel cleared for black operations work, Thorne continued. If you hold that clearance, stand now. The words cut through the room like a gunshot. I didn't think. Didn't hesitate. Years of training took over. I stood. The room shifted. Heads turned. Confusion rippled through the assembled officers. And then Dad laughed. Not a chuckle. A full, disbelieving laugh that echoed off the reinforced walls. Sherry-Ann, sit down, he said, still laughing, shaking his head. You don't belong here. This is for special operations personnel. The words hit like physical blows. Every officer in the room stared at me. Some with pity. Some with secondhand embarrassment. Marcus's face flushed red. Dad, he whispered urgently. Don't. But Admiral Thorne raised a hand, silencing the room. His gray eyes locked onto mine. No judgment. Just assessment. Call sign, he asked. 2 words. That's all it took. I met his gaze, spine straight, voice clear. Shadow 9. Silence crashed over the room like a tsunami. Recognition dawned on faces throughout the space. Officers who'd read after-action reports featuring Shadow 9. Commanders who'd received intelligence I'd decoded. Analysts who'd studied operations I'd executed in the dark corners of the world. Dad's face transformed in stages. Disbelief. Confusion. Denial. And finally, as officer after officer subtly nodded acknowledgement, horrified understanding. His chair scraped backward. He sat down heavily, all color draining from his face. His mouth opened and closed wordlessly, a man drowning in the revelation that the daughter he'd dismissed had been swimming in waters deeper and darker than he'd ever navigated. Marcus stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Shadow 9, he whispered. You're the Shadow 9? Admiral Thorne's expression remained neutral, but something like approval flickered in his eyes. Proceed with the briefing. Shadow 9, your input will be required. The next hour was surreal. Maps updated with operational details. Asset positions. Extraction routes. Risk assessments. And when Thorne asked for strategic input, I provided it, calm, precise, drawing on 6 years of operations he could never discuss at family barbecues. Officers asked questions. I answered. Someone mentioned a previous op in North Africa. I referenced it with the casual familiarity of someone who'd been there, done that, nearly died in the process. Through it all, Dad sat frozen. Silent. Processing a reality that didn't fit any version of the world he'd constructed. When Thorne finally dismissed everyone, the room emptied in clusters, officers murmuring, throwing glances my way. Respectful now. Curious. Marcus approached first, tie loosened, eyes wide. Sis. I don't even know what to say. Shadow 9 is, people talk about you in the intelligence community. They say you're a ghost. That you've never failed a mission. I shrugged, exhaustion suddenly heavy on my shoulders. It's just a name, Marcus. Just a name? He laughed, but it was shaky. There are legends about you. Dad still sat at the table, staring at nothing. The mighty Commander Elias Crane, reduced to silence by the truth of his middle child. I walked to him slowly. Crouched beside his chair so we were eye level. Dad? He looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in my entire life. How long? His voice cracked. How long have you been? 6 years. Since I finished special operations training. 6 years. He repeated it like a prayer. Like a confession. 6 years and I never knew. I couldn't tell you. Classification levels. Security protocols. But I'm your father. The words broke on the last syllable. I should have. I should have seen. I placed my hand on his. How could you see what I was trained to hide? He closed his eyes. When he opened them, tears gleamed on his lashes, the first time I'd ever seen my father cry. I failed you, he whispered. I looked at you every day and saw what I wanted to see. Not who you actually were. You didn't fail me, Dad. You just didn't see me. But you see me now. He gripped my hand like a drowning man clutching a lifeline. I see you now, Cherienne. God help me, I finally see you. Reconciliation doesn't happen in grand gestures. It happens in text messages at midnight. In phone calls that last 3 hours. In visits where you finally tell the truth instead of maintaining the comfortable lie. Dad came to my apartment a week later, a Spartan space that made his Navy-ordered home look cluttered. Maps on the walls. Gear stowed with precision. Everything optimized for rapid deployment. You live like a ship, he observed, approval finally, in his voice. We talked until dawn. He told me about the pressure he'd felt to produce a legacy, to see his children succeed in ways that reflected well on him. How he'd looked at Marcus and seen himself, bold, visible, commanding. But you, he said, voice rough with regret. You I didn't understand. You were quiet. Thoughtful. You didn't push back like Marcus did. So I assumed you needed protection, not opportunity. I learned to be quiet from you, I told him. You taught me that silence can be a strategy. That observation matters more than noise. I taught you that? Every day. Just not the way you intended. He was quiet for a long moment. I can't change how I saw you for 26 years. But Cherienne? I want to earn the right to see you properly now. To know who you really are. It wasn't forgiveness. It was better. It was a beginning. More briefings followed. More moments where I stood and he processed. Where other officers showed me respect he finally witnessed. where the daughter he'd dismissed proved she'd been the warrior all along. One evening, walking on the beach near our old house, Dad stopped to watch the sunset paint the sky in violence and beauty. "I thought I knew what strength looked like," he said quietly. "Commanding ships. Leading men. Making noise that couldn't be ignored. That is strength," I agreed. "But so is this." He gestured at the horizon. "The tide doesn't announce itself. It just comes in, steady and unstoppable, changing everything without fanfare. That's you, Sherry. You're the tide I never saw coming." I linked my arm through his. "I learned from the best, Dad." He leaned his head against mine. "No, kiddo. I'm finally learning from you. So here's the truth about being invisible: sometimes it's the most powerful thing you can be. Because when people finally see you, when they finally understand what you've been all along, it shatters every comfortable assumption they've held." I'm Sherry Crane. Call sign, Shadow 9. Daughter. Sister. Ghost. Warrior. And if you're out there, feeling unseen by the people who should know you best, here's what I want you to understand: your silence isn't weakness. Your stillness isn't surrender. Sometimes the quietest people are fighting the loudest battles. Keep fighting. Keep being exactly who you are, even when nobody sees it. Because one day, maybe in a briefing room, maybe in a quiet moment of truth, they'll finally understand what you've been all along. And that moment of recognition? It's worth every second of invisibility. Thanks for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. We all deserve to be seen. This is Shadow 9, signing off.